The scream cut through the howling November wind like a knife through butter, and Jacob Preston knew before he even urged his horse toward the sound that whoever was out there on this freezing Montana night would be dead by morning if he didn't find them fast. He had been riding toward Challies for 3 days straight, eager to collect the bounty money waiting for him at the marshal's office. But the desperation in that cry made him pull hard on the reins and turn his chestnut mare toward the dense forest edging the Rocky Mountain Trail. The year was 1876, and these mountains didn't forgive mistakes or hesitation. Jacob was 24 years old, lean and weathered from 6 years of tracking outlaws across Montana territory. His dark hair hung past his collar, and 3 days of stubble shadowed his jaw. He wasn't a cruel man, but he had learned early that survival meant making hard choices and not asking too many questions. Yet something about that scream, high and terrified and distinctly feminine, made his chest tighten with an urgency he couldn't explain. The wind picked up as he guided his mare through the pines, his breath visible in the cold air. Snow had started falling an hour ago, and already the ground showed a thin white coating. He called out into the darkness, his voice nearly lost in the wind. For a moment there was only silence, and then he heard it again, closer now, a frantic voice speaking words he didn't understand. He found her huddled against a boulder, her deerskin dress torn and muddy, her long black hair tangled with pine needles and leaves. She couldn't have been more than 20 years old, her face streaked with dirt and tears. When his horse appeared through the trees, she scrambled backward, her dark eyes wide with fear, and said something in a language that sounded like rushing water over stones. Jacob raised both hands, showing her his palms. "Easy now. I'm not going to hurt you." She stared at him, trembling violently from cold or fear or both. Her lips were turning blue, and he could see she wore no coat or blanket despite the freezing temperature. Blood stained her left arm where something had torn through the soft leather of her sleeve. "You're hurt," he said, keeping his voice low and steady as he dismounted. She flinched when his boots hit the ground, pressing herself harder against the rock. "I have shelter not far from here. A cave I use when I'm hunting in these mountains. You'll freeze to death if you stay out here." She spoke again in her language, the words tumbling over each other in her panic. Jacob didn't need translation to understand the fear in her voice. He moved slowly, pulling his heavy coat from behind his saddle. When he held it out to her, she stared at it as if it might be a trap. "Please," he said, "just the coat. You're freezing." Perhaps it was the gentleness in his tone, or perhaps she simply had no choice left, but she reached out with shaking fingers and took the coat. She wrapped it around her shoulders, and he saw relief flash across her face as the warmth began to penetrate. "The cave is 20 minutes west," he said, gesturing in that direction. "Can you ride?" She looked at his horse, then back at him, uncertainty written in every line of her body. Jacob took a chance and moved to his mare's side, patting the saddle. "Up here. I'll walk alongside." Understanding seemed to dawn. She pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly, and he saw her wince as she put weight on her right ankle. Without thinking, he moved to help her, but she jerked away from his touch. He stepped back immediately, hands raised again. "All right. But we need to move before this snow gets worse." It took several minutes of patient gesturing and quiet encouragement, but finally, she accepted his help mounting the horse. She sat stiffly in the saddle, gripping the horn with white knuckles. Jacob took the reins and began leading the mare through the forest. The cave entrance was barely visible behind a screen of pine branches, exactly as he had left it 3 weeks ago. He had discovered this shelter 2 years back and had gradually stocked it with supplies for his hunting trips. Now he was grateful for that foresight as he pushed aside the branches and led his horse into the protected overhang. The cave ran back about 30 feet into the mountain, deep enough to provide shelter, but shallow enough that he didn't worry about bears. He had built a fire ring from stones near the entrance where the smoke could escape, and he had stacked dry wood along one wall, protected from weather by an old piece of canvas. A bedroll lay against the far wall alongside his saddlebags and extra gear. The woman slid down from the horse before he could help her, landing awkwardly on her injured ankle. She caught herself against the cave wall, breathing hard. Jacob quickly tied his mare to a rock outcropping where she would be sheltered from the wind, then turned his attention to building a fire. His hands worked automatically, arranging kindling and striking his flint. The woman watched him from where she had lowered herself to the ground near the back wall, still wrapped in his coat. Within minutes, flames crackled to life, and the cave began to fill with warmth and flickering light. Jacob pulled dried meat and hardtack from his saddlebag, along with his canteen. He approached her slowly, crouching down to set the food and water within her reach. She stared at the offerings, then at him, something like gratitude flickering in her dark eyes. "Eat," he said, miming the action. "You need strength." She reached for the canteen first, drinking deeply. Then she took the dried meat, tearing into it with an urgency that told him she hadn't eaten in days. Jacob returned to the fire, giving her space, and began preparing coffee in his battered tin pot. The wind howled outside, driving snow past the cave entrance. Jacob moved to arrange the canvas over the opening, leaving a gap for ventilation but blocking most of the cold air. The temperature in the cave rose quickly, and he saw the woman's shoulders finally begin to relax. When the coffee was ready, he poured some into his spare cup and brought it to her. She took it carefully, wrapping her hands around the warm metal. Their eyes met, and for the first time he saw something other than fear in her gaze. "Jacob," he said, pointing to himself. "My name is Jacob." She studied him for a long moment, then spoke softly. "Gina Greywing." Her accent was heavy, the syllables shaped differently than his own, but the meaning was clear. He smiled. "Gina, that's a good name." She repeated his name, testing it on her tongue. "Jacob." They sat in silence after that, the only sounds the crackling fire and the wind outside. Jacob examined her more closely in the firelight. Despite the dirt and exhaustion, she was beautiful, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw. Her deerskin dress was finely made, decorated with intricate beadwork in patterns he didn't recognize. This was no ordinary woman. The quality of her clothing and the bear claw necklace at her throat suggested someone of importance within her tribe. "Your arm," he said, gesturing to the blood on her sleeve. "Can I look?" She hesitated, then slowly extended her arm. Jacob moved closer, careful to maintain a respectful distance, and gently pushed back the torn leather. The wound wasn't deep, but it was dirty. He retrieved his medical supplies from his saddlebag, the small kit he carried for emergencies. "This might hurt," he warned, soaking a cloth in whiskey from his flask. "But it needs to be clean." When he pressed the alcohol-soaked cloth to the wound, she hissed in pain but didn't pull away. Her jaw clenched, muscles standing out in her neck, but she held perfectly still as he cleaned and bandaged the injury. He worked as gently as he could, aware of how vulnerable she must feel. "There," he said when he finished, securing the bandage with a knot. "That should heal fine if it stays clean." "Thank you," she said in heavily accented English, surprising him. "You speak English?" "Little, very little." She held up her thumb and forefinger close together to illustrate. "Missionary, long time ago." "Well, it's more than I speak of your language," Jacob said with a smile. "What happened to you? How did you end up lost in the mountains?" Understanding his question seemed to take effort. She frowned, searching for words. "Hunting with brother. Men come, bad men." She made a shooting motion with her hand. Brother tell me run, I run, get lost. 3 days walk. Jacob felt cold anger settle in his gut. These bad men, did they hurt your brother? Her face crumpled and he had his answer. She spoke rapidly in her own language, clearly unable to express in English what had happened. But he understood enough. Raiders or outlaws had attacked her and her brother during a hunting trip. Her brother had sacrificed himself so she could escape. I'm sorry, Jacob said quietly. Your brother was brave, she nodded, tears tracking through the dirt on her face. They sat in heavy silence, the weight of grief filling the cave. Jacob wanted to say something comforting, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he stood and retrieved his bedroll. You should sleep, he said, laying the bedroll near the fire. I'll keep watch. Gina looked at the bedroll, then at him. You sleep, I'll be fine. You need rest more than I do. She shook her head firmly. We share, cold. Jacob started to protest, but she was right. The temperature would drop further as night deepened, and he had already given her his coat. The bedroll was large enough for two if they stayed close together. It made practical sense, even if it felt improper. All right, he agreed, but I'll stay on this side, you take that side. She nodded, apparently satisfied with this arrangement. They settled onto the bedroll with a careful distance between them, using his coat and her own smaller blanket as covering. Jacob lay on his back, staring at the cave ceiling, intensely aware of her presence beside him. She smelled of pine smoke and the wild outdoors, and despite everything she had endured, he caught hints of sage and sweetgrass, herbs worked into her clothing. Jacob, her voice was soft in the darkness. Yes. Why you help? It was a fair question. In this territory, plenty of men would have ridden past that scream, not wanting to get involved. Some might have stopped with worse intentions than help. He thought about his answer. Because it was the right thing to do, he said finally. Because nobody should die alone in the cold if there's a choice. She was quiet for so long he thought she might have fallen asleep. Then she spoke again, even softer. You good man. Something in those simple words made his chest tighten. Just a man. Get some rest, Gina. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to find your people. Her breathing gradually deepened and slowed, and Jacob knew she had finally surrendered to exhaustion. He lay awake much longer, feeding the fire occasionally and listening to the storm outside. His mind churned with questions. Where was her tribe? How far had she run? Would her people blame him for her brother's death when they found her with a white man? But underneath all those practical concerns ran a strange current of something else, something he didn't want to examine too closely. There was something about this woman, about her courage and strength despite her fear, that had taken root in him during these few hours. He told himself it was just sympathy, just the natural protective instinct any decent person would feel. But when he finally did drift toward sleep, it was with the sound of her breathing in his ears and an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. He woke to find the storm had passed and weak dawn light filtering through gaps in the canvas covering the entrance. Gina was pressed against his side, seeking warmth in sleep, her head pillowed on his shoulder. Jacob held perfectly still, not wanting to wake her but acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. In sleep, the fear had left her face and she looked peaceful despite the dirt and scratches. Slowly, carefully, he eased himself free and stood. His body ached from the hard ground, and his neck protested as he rolled his shoulders. He moved to the cave entrance and pushed aside the canvas, blinking in the bright morning light. Snow covered everything in a pristine white blanket, at least 6 inches deep. The sky had cleared to a brilliant blue, and the sun hung low on the horizon. Behind him, he heard Gina stir. He turned to find her sitting up, confusion crossing her face before memory returned. She looked at him, then at the cave entrance, then back at him. Morning, he said. Morning, she repeated. She stood slowly, testing her injured ankle, and made her way to the entrance. When she saw the snow, she spoke rapidly in her own language, words tumbling over each other. "What is it?" Jacob asked, though he suspected he knew. Fresh snow would have covered any trail she might have left. Finding her way back to her people just became exponentially harder. She turned to him, and he saw fear returning to her eyes. But before she could speak, a sound cut through the morning air. Voices, calling in the same language Gina spoke. Many voices coming closer. Gina's face transformed, joy replacing fear so suddenly it was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. She rushed past Jacob to the cave entrance and called back, her voice ringing out strong and clear. The approaching voices responded with obvious excitement. "Your people?" Jacob asked, though the answer was obvious. "Yes, yes," she grabbed his arm, her smile brilliant. "They find me." Within minutes, warriors appeared through the trees. There were at least 20 of them, all armed, all mounted on horses painted with symbols Jacob didn't recognize. They pulled up short when they saw him standing beside Gina, and the air suddenly crackled with tension. An older warrior at the front spoke sharply to Gina. She responded quickly, gesturing between Jacob and the cave. The conversation went back and forth rapidly, and Jacob stood still, keeping his hands visible and away from his weapons. These men could kill him in seconds if they decided he was a threat. Finally, the lead warrior dismounted and approached. He was perhaps 50 years old, his face weathered and stern, his hair streaked with gray. He stopped a few feet from Jacob and studied him with intense dark eyes. When he spoke, his English was much better than Gina's. "This girl say you save her life, give her shelter, feed her, ask nothing in return." "That's true," Jacob said carefully. "I heard her call for help in the storm. I couldn't leave her to freeze. Many white men would not help. Many white men would hurt. I'm not those men." The warrior continued his assessment, and Jacob had the uncomfortable feeling of being weighed and measured. Finally, the older man nodded once, sharply. "I am Chief Gina Greywing. This girl is my daughter. Her brother, my son, is dead because of white men." "You understand why we come ready for war?" Jacob's stomach dropped. The chief's daughter, of course she was. "I understand, sir. I'm sorry about your son. Gina told me what happened." "Gina." The chief's mouth twitched slightly. "The missionary name, she used it to talk to you." "It's the only name I know." Chief Greywing turned and spoke to his warriors in their language. Several of them dismounted and approached the cave, examining everything. Jacob fought the urge to step back, to reach for his rifle. Any aggressive move now would be his last. Gina was speaking urgently to her father, gesturing at Jacob at the cave, clearly explaining everything that had happened. The chief listened, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he turned back to Jacob. "My daughter say you are good man. Say you could have taken advantage but treated her with respect. She say you clean her wound, give her your coat, your food. This is true?" "Yes, sir." "You want reward, money, horses?" "No, sir. I'm just glad she's safe." Something shifted in the chief's eyes. Not quite approval, but perhaps a softening of judgment. He spoke again to his warriors, and the tension eased fractionally. Men lowered their weapons, though they didn't put them away entirely. "You have done my family great service," Chief Greywing said. "In our way, this create debt. Blood debt, since you saved my daughter's life. But you are white man, and my son is dead by white men's hands. My people are angry. They want revenge, want blood for blood." Jacob's mouth went dry. "I understand your grief, Chief, but I had nothing to do with your son's death. I know this. My daughter know this. But my people are hurt, angry. They need something." The chief paused, choosing his words carefully. "There is old tradition, very old, from before white men come. When great service is done, when life debt is created, the one who is saved can offer marriage bond. Join families, join tribes. Make stranger into family. Jacob's mind went blank. He couldn't have heard that correctly. Marriage, Chief Greywing gestured to Gina, who was watching them with wide eyes. My daughter is 20 years old, not yet married. She is precious to me, especially now that my son is gone. If you marry her, join our family, blood debt is satisfied. You become one of us. My people see that not all white men are enemies, and you gain family protection, good wife. Wait. Jacob held up his hand, his thoughts spinning. You're asking me to marry your daughter, just like that, not just like that. Is serious thing, sacred thing, but my daughter must agree also. This is our way. Woman choose or refuse. The chief turned to Gina and spoke in their language. Gina's face went through a rapid series of emotions. Surprise, confusion, and then something Jacob couldn't identify. She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw her thinking, weighing, deciding. When she responded to her father, her voice was quiet but firm. Chief Greywing nodded slowly. My daughter say yes. She say you show her kindness when you could have shown cruelty. Say you have good spirit. She willing to honor tradition, to marry you if you agree. Jacob felt like the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Yesterday he had been riding to Challies to collect bounty money. Now he was being offered marriage to a tribal chief's daughter he had known for less than 12 hours. It was insane. Impossible. The logical response was to politely refuse and ride away. But he found himself looking at Gina, really looking at her. Despite the dirt and exhaustion, despite the fear she had endured, she stood straight and proud. She had shown remarkable courage, surviving 3 days alone in the wilderness after watching her brother die. She could have let fear make her cruel or suspicious, but instead she had accepted his help with grace. And when she had slept beside him, trusting him with her safety, something in his chest had shifted. This is a lot to take in, Jacob said slowly. Can I ask what happens if I say no? You are free to go. Debt is paid by my gratitude, but my people remain angry, remain hurt. And my daughter returned home still unmarried, with no brother to protect her, with other men in tribe who will want to claim her as wife now that she is vulnerable. The chief's face hardened. She deserve better than to be claimed like property. This way she choose. She have power. Jacob understood what wasn't being said. If he refused, Gina would be in a difficult position within her tribe. Her brother was dead, and in their culture she would need a husband's protection. Without her choosing, she might be forced into a marriage she didn't want. He looked at Gina again. She was watching him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. There was hope in her eyes, but also resignation, as if she expected him to refuse. If I agree, Jacob said carefully, what would that mean exactly? Where would we live? What would be expected of me? Chief Greywing seemed pleased by the question. You would live with our tribe at least for first year to learn our ways. After, if you wish to leave and take my daughter to white man's world, that is between you and her. But first year, you become one of us. Learn our language, our customs. Prove you are worthy husband. I know nothing about your ways. My daughter will teach you. And if your heart is good, rest will follow. The chief gestured at the cave, at the supplies Jacob had shared. You already show you know most important thing. You know how to care for another person above yourself. This is good start. Jacob's mind raced through everything this would mean. He would have to give up his life as a bounty hunter, at least temporarily. Give up his freedom to roam. But what was he really giving up? He had no family, no home to speak of. He drifted from town to town, taking dangerous jobs that could get him killed any day. Was that really a life worth protecting? And there was something about Gina, something that called to him. Maybe it was just the circumstance, the intensity of their meeting. Or maybe it was something deeper, something his heart recognized even if his head couldn't explain it. He walked over to Gina, ignoring the tense warriors watching his every move. He stood in front of her, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "You truly want this?" he asked quietly. "If you could choose anything, would you choose this?" She studied his face for a long moment. When she spoke, her English was halting but clear. "I see you. I see your spirit. You have good heart. My brother died to save me. I not want his sacrifice become nothing. If I must marry, I choose you." It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even particularly romantic. But it was honest, and Jacob found he respected that honesty more than any pretty words could have offered. He turned back to Chief Greywing. "All right, I accept." A ripple went through the gathered warriors. The chief's stern face broke into something that might have been a smile. He said something in his language, and several warriors dismounted, approaching Jacob with less hostility than before. "We do ceremony tonight," Chief Greywing said. "First we return to village, prepare. You come with us. Bring your horse, your things. You are family now." The next few hours passed in a blur. Jacob packed his gear while warriors examined his cave supplies with interest. One younger warrior tried to ask him questions in broken English, gesturing at his rifle and pistol. Jacob answered as best he could, aware that he was being tested, evaluated by these men who might become his brothers. Gina stayed close to him, occasionally translating or explaining. Someone had given her a clean dress and helped her wash her face and hair in melted snow. She looked transformed, her beauty no longer hidden beneath dirt and exhaustion. Jacob caught himself staring more than once. They rode together on his horse, heading north through the mountains. Gina sat in front of him, and he was intensely aware of her back against his chest, her hair occasionally brushing his face when the wind picked up. She smelled better now, clean, with that hint of sage returning. "You scared?" she asked quietly as they rode. "Terrified," he admitted. She laughed, the sound surprising him. It was warm and genuine, nothing like the frightened woman from last night. "Me too, but good scared, like standing at edge of cliff before jump in water, scared but also excited." "That's a good way to put it." He paused, then added, "Your English is getting better. I remember more now. Missionary teach me when I was small girl. I forget much, but it come back." She twisted slightly to look at him. "You try learn our language too. I'll do my best. Can't promise I'll be any good at it." "You will learn. I teach you." There was confidence in her voice and something else. Pride, maybe, or anticipation. The village appeared in a valley as the sun reached its peak. It was larger than Jacob had expected, perhaps 60 lodges arranged in a loose circle. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and people moved among the structures, going about their daily lives. When the warriors appeared with their lost daughter, a cry went up, and people came running. Women embraced Gina, tears streaming down their faces. An older woman who Jacob guessed was her mother held her for a long time, speaking rapidly and touching her face as if to confirm she was real. Children crowded around, shouting questions. Through it all, Jacob sat on his horse, watching, feeling very much the outsider. Chief Greywing dismounted and spoke to the gathered crowd. Jacob didn't understand the words, but he understood the gesture when the chief pointed at him. Every eye turned his direction, and the crowd went quiet. The chief continued speaking, his voice carrying authority, and Jacob caught his own name several times along with Gina's. When the chief finished, there was a moment of heavy silence. Then the older woman, Gina's mother, approached Jacob's horse. She looked up at him with eyes that had cried out their tears, and she spoke softly. Gina translated from beside him. "My mother say thank you. Say you bring her daughter home when she thought daughter was dead. Say you are welcome in her lodge, in her heart." Jacob dismounted and faced Gina's mother. He wished he knew the right words, the right customs. Instead, he simply bowed his head respectfully. "I'm honored, madam. Your daughter is very brave. She survived because of her own strength." Gina translated, and her mother smiled. She reached out and touched Jacob's face gently, a gesture that seemed both maternal and accepting. Then she turned and spoke rapidly, apparently giving orders because suddenly people were moving with purpose. "Wedding preparation," Gina explained. "Everything must be ready by sunset. My mother, take charge now. You go with father and other men. They prepare you. I see you at ceremony." "Wait." Jacob caught her hand before she could turn away. "Are you all right with all of this?" She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. "I am all right, scared, but all right. You?" "Same." She squeezed his hand briefly. "Then we be all right together. This is good enough for start, yes?" "Yeah," Jacob said, surprised by how much he meant it. "That's good enough." She left with the women, who swept her away in a flurry of activity. Chief Greywing approached and clapped Jacob on the shoulder. "Come. We prepare you for ceremony. Must look proper for wedding." Jacob followed the chief to a lodge near the center of the village. Inside, several elder men were waiting. They gestured for him to sit, and then one of them began speaking in English, though his accent was thick. "We tell you about ceremony, about what it means to marry one of our women. You listen, you learn." The old man's eyes were sharp despite his age. "Marriage is sacred bond. Husband must provide, must protect, must honor wife. Wife does same for husband. Both become stronger together than either alone. You understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Tonight in ceremony you make promises. Promise to care for Gina Greywing as she care for you. Promise to be good man, good husband. Promise to honor our people and our ways." The elder paused. "Is serious thing. If you break promise, there is consequence. You understand this too?" Jacob met the old man's gaze steadily. "I understand. I don't make promises lightly." The elder seemed satisfied. He nodded to the other men, and they began preparing Jacob for the ceremony. They brought him clean clothes in their style, leather leggings and a shirt decorated with quillwork. They insisted he wash thoroughly in a basin of heated water, and one of the younger men trimmed his hair and shaved his stubble with surprising skill. As they worked, the men talked among themselves in their language, occasionally asking Jacob questions in English. Where was he from? Why did he become a bounty hunter? Did he have family? Jacob answered honestly, explaining that his parents had died when he was 16 in a barn fire outside of Billings. He had been on his own ever since, taking whatever work he could find. "No family make you understand loss," the elder said quietly. "Make you understand what Gina feel when brother die. This is good. You have compassion." "I hope so," Jacob said. "I hope I can be what she needs. You will be, or you would not agree to marry. Fear is good, mean you take it serious." By the time they finished preparing him, the sun was dropping toward the mountains. Jacob barely recognized himself when they showed him a polished metal mirror. He looked like a different person in the tribal clothing, his hair neat, his face clean. He looked like someone who might belong here. Chief Greywing appeared in the doorway. "Is time. Come." Jacob followed the chief outside, and his breath caught. The village had been transformed. A large fire burned in the center of the circle, and people had gathered around it in their finest clothing. Drums began to beat, a steady rhythm that seemed to match his heartbeat. Warriors stood in lines on one side, women on the other, creating a path to the fire. And at the end of that path stood Gina. She wore a white deerskin dress so finely made it must have taken months to create. Intricate beadwork covered the bodice in patterns that caught the firelight, and fringe swayed at her hem. Her long black hair had been braided and decorated with small white flowers. She was breathtaking. Their eyes met across the fire, and Jacob saw his own nervousness reflected back at him. But he also saw something else. Determination. hope, maybe even the beginning of trust. He started walking toward her and the crowd parted to let him through. When he reached her side, she smiled up at him. "You look different." "So do you, beautiful." She blushed, ducking her head. Chief Greywing stepped between them and the fire, raising his hands. The drums fell silent and everyone waited. The chief began to speak in his language, his voice carrying over the crowd. Jacob understood nothing, but the tone was solemn and important. Gina stood rigid beside him, and he resisted the urge to take her hand. After several minutes, the chief switched to English, clearly for Jacob's benefit. "We gather here to witness union of my daughter, Gentle Wind Greywing, and Jacob Preston, white man who saved her life. This is unusual joining, but it honor old traditions. When life debt is created, marriage bond is sacred answer. Gentle Wind." So that was her real name. Jacob glanced at her and she smiled slightly. The chief continued. "Jacob Preston, you agree to join our people, to learn our ways, to honor our traditions, to become one of us in truth." "I do," Jacob said clearly. "You agree to care for my daughter, to protect her, to honor her, to be faithful and true." "I do." Chief Greywing turned to Gina and spoke in their language. She responded, her voice steady and strong. The chief nodded, then gestured to an older woman who came forward carrying a long braided cord. "We bind your hands together," the chief explained, "symbol of your lives becoming one. What is bound here before our people, and our spirits cannot be easily broken." The older woman took Jacob's right hand and Gina's left hand, placing them together palm to palm. Then she began winding the cord around their joined hands, speaking softly as she worked. The cord was made of different colored threads woven together, and it was surprisingly strong. When their hands were securely bound, Chief Greywing placed his own hands over theirs. "I bless this union. May you find strength in each other. May you face troubles together. May you create new life and new joy. You are now husband and wife in eyes of our people and in eyes of spirits." The drums began again, faster this time, celebratory. The crowd erupted in sounds of approval. Someone began singing and others joined in. Jacob and Gina stood together, hands bound, while people came forward to offer congratulations and gifts. Gina translated when she could, explaining who people were and what they were saying. Jacob tried to remember names and faces, knowing it mattered. These were his people now, his family in a way he hadn't had family since his parents died. It was overwhelming and strange and oddly comforting all at once. Eventually, Gina's mother approached and gently untied the cord binding their hands. She kept the cord, tucking it into her dress, and spoke to Gina in their language. Gina's cheeks flushed pink. "What did she say?" Jacob asked. "She say we should go to wedding lodge, is prepared for us." Gina's voice was shy now. "Is tradition for couple to be alone after ceremony." Jacob's mouth went dry. Of course that was tradition. They were married now and certain things were expected, but they barely knew each other, had only met yesterday. The idea of rushing into intimacy felt wrong despite the ceremony. Gina must have seen something in his face because she spoke quietly. "We not have to do anything. We just go be alone, away from crowd. We talk, we rest, we become comfortable." "Yes, yes," Jacob agreed, relieved. "That sounds good." She took his hand, the gesture feeling natural now, and led him through the crowd to a lodge at the edge of the village. It was smaller than the others, clearly set apart for privacy. Someone had decorated the entrance with flowers and herbs, and smoke rose from a fire inside. They ducked through the entrance together, and Jacob found the interior surprisingly comfortable. Furs and blankets covered the floor, and a small fire burned in a ring of stones at the center. Food and water had been laid out, along with what looked like wedding gifts, tools and blankets and decorated items. Gina closed the entrance flap, giving them privacy, and suddenly the noise of the celebration faded to a distant hum. They were alone, properly alone, for the first time since her people had found them. Husband and wife. The reality of it hit Jacob like a physical force. "Sit," Gina said, gesturing to the furs. "We eat. Talk." Jacob sat and she joined him, careful to leave some space between them. She poured something from a clay vessel into wooden cups and handed him one. "Berry juice, sweet, for celebration." He drank, grateful for something to do with his hands. The juice was indeed sweet, with an unfamiliar but pleasant flavor. Gina sipped her own cup and they sat in awkward silence for a moment. "This is strange," Jacob finally said. "Being married to someone I just met." "Yes, very strange." Gina set down her cup. "But maybe not so strange as it seems. In our way, marriage is often arranged. Families choose, couple learn to love after. We have choice to say yes or no, but not usually choose who, so this is not so different. Did you ever think about who you might marry? Before all this?" She smiled slightly. "Sometimes. I think I marry someone from our tribe, strong warrior or good hunter. I think I have years to decide. My brother always say he will help me choose, make sure man is worthy." Her smile faded. "Now he gone. Everything different than I think." Jacob set down his own cup and shifted closer. "I'm sorry about your brother. Truly, I wish I could have helped him too. You helped by saving me, by honoring his sacrifice. He would like you, I think. He would approve." Gina looked at him with those dark eyes that seemed to see too much. "You are kind man, Jacob Preston. In here." She touched her chest over her heart. "I feel this when you help me in storm, when you give me your coat, when you clean my wound and ask nothing in return. I feel your spirit is good." "I feel the same about you," Jacob said honestly. "You're brave and strong. You survived something that would have killed most people. And you're not bitter or angry, even though you have every right to be. I am angry. About my brother, about men who kill him. But anger is like fire. Use it wrong, it destroy everything. Use it right, it keep you warm, help you cook food, light your way." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I choose to use my anger right. Choose to make something good from something bad. Choose you." The weight of her words settled over them. Jacob reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers curled around his, warm and real. "I'm going to do my best," he said quietly, "to be a good husband, to learn your ways, to make you glad you chose me. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I promise I'll try. That is all I ask, that we both try." Gina squeezed his hand. "We learn together. We become strong together. This is what marriage is, yes. Yes." They sat like that for a while, hands joined, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the celebration continued, drums and singing filling the night. But inside their lodge, there was only quiet and the beginning of something fragile and new. "You tired?" Gina asked eventually. "Exhausted," Jacob admitted. "It's been a long 2 days. For me too." She stood and began arranging the furs into a sleeping area. "We sleep. Tomorrow everything start new. You start learning our ways, I start learning about you. But tonight, we just rest." They lay down on opposite sides of the furs, maintaining that careful distance. But as the fire died down and the night grew colder, Jacob felt Gina shift closer, seeking warmth just as she had in the cave. This time he didn't hesitate. He put his arm around her and she settled against his side with a soft sigh. "Good night, wife," he said softly. "Good night, husband." Despite everything, despite the strangeness and the fear and the uncertainty, Jacob fell asleep quickly. And for the first time in years, he didn't sleep alone. Morning came too early. Jacob woke to find Gina already up and moving around the lodge, stirring the fire and preparing food. She had changed from her wedding dress into a simpler deerskin outfit, though still beautifully made. "Morning," she said, smiling at him. In the daylight, without the ceremony and the crowd, she seemed more relaxed. "You sleep good, better than I have in months." He sat up, running a hand through his hair. "What happens now? Now we eat. Then you meet with elders, start learning. I have women's work to do, but we come together for evening meal." She brought him a wooden bowl filled with something that smelled surprisingly good. "Is corn mush with berries." Traditional morning food. Jacob tried it and found it better than it looked. As they ate, Gina explained the daily routine of the village, pointing out the entrance and gesturing in directions he couldn't yet see. "Village has 3 main areas," she said. "Center is for gathering, ceremonies. North side is for families with small children. South side is for unmarried warriors and elders. We are here, east side, with other young married couples. How many people live here? Maybe 200. Is good size village. Not too big, not too small. Everyone know everyone, but still have some privacy." She paused. "Some people not happy about you, not trust white men, but they see you try, they accept. This is our way. I understand. I'll prove myself." After breakfast, Chief Greywing arrived to collect Jacob. "Today you begin learning. First, you learn language. Cannot be part of people if you cannot speak to people." Jacob spent the morning with the same elder who had helped prepare him for the ceremony. The old man's name was something Jacob couldn't quite pronounce, but he told Jacob to call him teacher. They sat outside Teacher's lodge, and the old man pointed at objects and said their names in the tribal language. Jacob repeated them, butchering the pronunciation over and over until Teacher was satisfied. Rock, water, fire, sky, tree. The words felt strange in his mouth. The sounds formed differently than English. But slowly, painfully, Jacob began to remember them. Around midday, young warriors appeared and Teacher switched to teaching Jacob about hunting practices. They showed him different types of arrows and explained what each was used for. One warrior, a man about Jacob's age named Swift Fox, seemed particularly interested in Jacob's rifle. "Trade?" Swift Fox asked in English, holding up an elaborately decorated bow. "No trade," Jacob said. "But I can teach you to shoot it if your chief allows." Swift Fox's eyes lit up. He quickly explained to Teacher, who considered for a moment before nodding. "Show us. But carefully. We respect weapons, do not waste shots." Jacob demonstrated loading and firing his rifle, aiming at a target one of the warriors set up. The shot rang out, and his bullet struck near the center. The warriors murmured appreciatively. Then Jacob showed them the mechanics, explaining how the weapon worked. Several of them took turns trying to shoot with varying success. "Your weapon good for distance," Swift Fox said, "but slow, need time to reload. Our bows shoot many arrows in same time." "You're right," Jacob agreed. "Each weapon has strengths and weaknesses. The best hunter knows how to use both." This answer seemed to please them. Swift Fox clapped Jacob on the shoulder. "You're not bad for white man. You learn quick." It was perhaps the best compliment Jacob could have received. He felt a small knot of tension in his chest ease. The afternoon was spent learning to track, something Jacob already knew but approached differently than his teachers. They showed him how to read signs he had never noticed, how to tell not just what animal had passed, but when and in what condition. Teacher explained that tracking was about understanding the story the land told, not just following footprints. By evening, Jacob's head was spinning with new information. He returned to his lodge to find Gina preparing dinner over the fire. She looked up when he entered and her face brightened. "You survived first day," she said with amusement. "How was it?" "Hard. My brain hurts from trying to remember words." He sat down heavily, "but good. The men were patient with me mostly. They see you trying. This is important." She handed him a bowl of stew. "Tomorrow will be easier. Each day gets easier as you learn." They ate together, and Gina asked him about his day. He told her about the language lessons and the shooting demonstration, and she laughed when he described his attempts to pronounce certain words. "That word you try to say means grandmother's breath. You need to breathe from here." She touched her diaphragm. "Not from here." She touched her throat. "Try again." Jacob tried, and this time it sounded closer. Gina nodded approvingly. "Better, you learn, just need practice. Will you practice with me? In the evenings, of course. Is my duty as wife to help husband." She paused, then added more softly, "And I want you to learn, want you to be comfortable here." As darkness fell, they prepared for bed again. This time there was less awkwardness. They had spent one night together already, had begun learning the rhythms of sharing space. When they lay down, Gina moved to his side naturally, and Jacob wrapped his arm around her just as naturally. "Jacob," she said quietly into the darkness. "Yes, I'm glad you said yes to marriage. I know is strange, is fast, but I think maybe good things can come from it." He tightened his arm around her slightly. "I think so too." The days began to form a pattern. Mornings with teacher learning language and customs. Afternoons with the warriors learning hunting techniques and tribal history. Evenings with Gina, practicing words and sharing stories about their lives before they met. Jacob learned that Gina had been born during a windstorm so fierce it had blown down several lodges, hence her name Gentle Wind, given ironically by her mother who had labored through the storm's violence. He learned that her brother had taught her to shoot a bow when she was 7, and she could outshoot most of the men in the village. He learned that she loved swimming in the summer and that her favorite food was roasted rabbit with sage. In turn, he told her about growing up on his parents' small farm, about learning to shoot from his father, about the day he came home to find their barn and house engulfed in flames with his parents trapped inside. He told her about the years of drifting that followed, taking jobs wherever he could, gradually falling into bounty hunting because he was good at tracking and didn't have anywhere else to be. "You were alone long time," Gina said one evening as they lay together in their lodge. "Now you're not alone." "No," Jacob agreed. "Now I'm not alone." 2 weeks after the wedding, Chief Greywing called Jacob to his lodge. The chief's wife, Gina's mother, served them tea and then left them to speak privately. "You learn well," the chief said without preamble. "Men tell me you work hard, do not complain. You try to speak our language even when words are difficult. You show respect. I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn. You also show you care for my daughter. I see how you look at her, how you treat her. This is good." The chief sipped his tea. "But now I must speak of difficult things. The men who killed my son, who hurt my daughter, they are still out there. They raid other tribes, attack travelers. They must be stopped." Jacob felt his spine straighten. "You're planning to go after them. We track them since we find my daughter. They have camp 20 miles south in Canyon by river. Tomorrow we ride. We will bring justice for my son." The chief's eyes were hard. "You are warrior now, part of our people. You will ride with us. I'll be ready. This is dangerous thing. You could die. My daughter could become widow before she even really become wife. You understand this?" "I understand." The chief nodded slowly. "Then prepare. We leave at dawn." Jacob returned to his lodge with a heavy heart. Gina was grinding corn into meal when he entered, and she looked up with a smile that faded when she saw his expression. "What wrong?" He told her about the conversation with her father. As he spoke, he watched the color drain from her face. She set down her grinding stone with shaking hands. "No. You just get here. You just start becoming one of us. You cannot go fight, cannot risk death so soon." Her voice was tight with fear. "Gina, I have to. Your father is right. I'm part of this people now, and that means standing with them when it matters." He moved closer, taking her hands. "Those men killed your brother. They hurt you. They'll hurt others if they're not stopped." "I know this," she said, tears starting to fall. "But I am afraid. I just find you. I cannot lose you." The raw emotion in her voice made Jacob's chest ache. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "You won't lose me. I promise I'll come back." "You cannot promise this. In battle, anything can happen." "You're right. I can't promise that nothing will happen, but I can promise that I'll fight like hell to come back to you." He pulled back enough to look at her face, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "These 2 weeks, getting to know you, becoming part of something bigger than myself, it's been the best time I can remember. I'm not giving that up without a fight." She pressed her face against his chest, her hands fisting in his shirt. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other, neither wanting to be the first to let go. That night they lay awake, talking quietly. Gina told him more stories about her brother, wanting Jacob to understand what had been lost. Jacob told her about the men he had tracked as a bounty hunter, the violence he had seen, wanting her to understand that he knew what he was walking into. "If something happened to you," Gina said, her voice barely a whisper, "I want you to know something. These 2 weeks, learning about you, spending evenings with you, waking up beside you, it make me happy. I start to feel something real, not just duty of wife to husband, real feeling in my heart." Jacob's breath caught. He had felt it too, that growing warmth when he saw her, the way his mood lifted when they were together. He had told himself it was just adjustment, just friendship forming. But it was more than that, and they both knew it. "I feel it too," he said quietly. "I didn't expect to, didn't think it was possible so fast. But I do." She turned in his arms to face him. In the dim light of the dying fire, her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Then you must promise me again. Promise you will do everything you can to come back. I promise." She kissed him then, the first real kiss they had shared. It was soft and scared and full of all the words they didn't know how to say. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. They made love that night for the first time, tender and careful, learning each other's bodies as they had been learning each other's hearts. And when they finally fell asleep wrapped around each other, it was with the knowledge that everything had changed. This was no longer just a marriage of convenience or tradition. This was real. Dawn came too quickly. Jacob dressed in the clothes Gina had made for him over the past weeks, leather leggings and a shirt, and checked his weapons. His rifle was clean and ready, his pistol loaded. Gina watched him prepare, her face pale but composed. "You come back to me," she said as he prepared to leave. "Not a question, a command." "I will." She handed him something wrapped in soft leather. "Is medicine bundle for protection. My grandmother made it, give to my brother. He die with it, but I think he would want you to have it, to help you come home." Jacob took the bundle reverently, tying it to his belt. "Thank you, I'll honor it." Outside, warriors were gathering. 20 men mounted on painted horses, armed with bows and rifles and knives. They were going to war, and the air crackled with anticipation and anger. Chief Greywing sat at the front on a black horse, and he nodded to Jacob when he appeared. Swift Fox rode up leading a horse, a strong brown gelding with intelligent eyes. "For you, from Chief. You ride with us, you need good horse." Jacob mounted, settling into the unfamiliar saddle. The horse shifted beneath him but accepted his weight calmly. Around him, warriors made final preparations, checking weapons and saying goodbye to families. Gina stood with the other women, her face a mask of controlled fear. Jacob caught her eye and pressed his hand over the medicine bundle at his belt. She nodded, understanding. Then Chief Greywing raised his hand and the war party rode out. They rode hard, covering ground quickly. The warriors were silent, grim purpose radiating from every man. Jacob rode beside Swift Fox, who explained in broken English what they knew about the raiders' camp. 7 men. Bad men. They have stolen horses, stolen goods from many raids. They think they are safe because they hide in canyon. But we know canyon. We know way in they do not watch. What's the plan? We surround canyon. Wait until night, then attack from all sides. They cannot escape. Swift Fox's face was hard. These men show no mercy. We show no mercy. Jacob understood. This wasn't about justice in the legal sense. This was about revenge, about tribal law. These men had killed one of their own and would be made to pay the ultimate price. They reached the canyon as the sun began to set. Chief Greywing split the warriors into groups, sending them to different positions around the canyon rim. Jacob went with Swift Fox and 3 others, climbing down through loose rocks to reach a ledge overlooking the raiders' camp. From their vantage point, Jacob could see the camp below. 7 men, just as Swift Fox had said, lounging around a fire. Stolen horses were tied to a rope line nearby, and Jacob could see various goods stacked around, plunder from their raids. The men looked rough, exactly the type Jacob had tracked for bounty money. Violent men who lived by taking what others had worked for. They waited as darkness fell. Jacob's muscles cramped from staying still, but he didn't move. Around the canyon, the other warriors would be in position, waiting for the signal. Chief Greywing had explained that they would attack when the moon reached its peak, when the raiders would be drowsy from their evening meal, and the fire would have died down enough to make the shadows deeper. Finally, a bird call echoed through the canyon. The signal. Swift Fox touched Jacob's shoulder and pointed. They moved together, climbing down as silently as shadows, bows ready. Other warriors were converging from all directions, a carefully coordinated attack. The raiders barely had time to react. One man stood to add wood to the fire and took an arrow in the chest. He fell without a sound. Another looked up in confusion and met the same fate. Then chaos erupted. The remaining raiders grabbed for weapons, shouting in alarm. Gunshots rang out, the sound deafening in the enclosed space of the canyon. Jacob sighted carefully and fired, his bullet taking down a man who was trying to reload his rifle. Around him, warriors fought with deadly efficiency, using the darkness and their superior numbers to their advantage. It was over in minutes. 7 men lay dead or dying around the campfire. One warrior had taken a minor wound, a graze across his shoulder, but otherwise the tribal fighters were unharmed. Chief Greywing walked among the bodies, his face like stone, until he found what he was looking for. "This one," he said, nudging a body with his foot. "This one has my son's knife. See the mark on handle. My son carried this knife since he became man." The warriors gathered around, looking at the evidence. Whatever doubts anyone might have had about the justice of this attack evaporated. These were definitely the men responsible for the death of Chief Greywing's son. They burned the raiders' camp, scattering the ashes. The stolen horses were rounded up to be returned to their rightful owners or absorbed into the tribal herd. Any useful supplies were taken. By dawn, nothing remained but scorched earth and bones for the scavengers. The ride back to the village was quieter than the ride out. The fury that had driven them had burned away, leaving exhaustion and grim satisfaction. Justice had been served in the old way, blood for blood. Jacob felt surprisingly little about having killed a man. He had done it before as a bounty hunter. These men had chosen their path and it had led to this end. What he felt most was relief. He had survived. He could keep his promise to Gina. The village appeared as the sun climbed toward midday. People came out to meet them, and Jacob searched the crowd anxiously for Gina. He spotted her near the front, standing with her mother, her face tight with worry. When she saw him riding in, alive and whole, her face transformed. She didn't run to him, that wouldn't be proper, but her relief was palpable even from a distance. Jacob dismounted and walked to her, very aware of the crowd watching. "I came back," he said simply. "You did." Her voice was thick with emotion. "You are hurt, not a scratch." Chief Greywing addressed the village, explaining what had happened. He held up his son's recovered knife, and a murmur went through the crowd. Some of the women began to wail, a sound of grief finally released now that vengeance was complete. Others nodded in grim approval. When the chief finished speaking, he turned to Jacob. "You fought well, proved yourself as warrior and as one of us. You have my respect and gratitude." Coming from the stern chief, it was high praise. Jacob bowed his head in acknowledgement. Around him, other warriors clapped him on the back or nodded in approval. He had passed some invisible test. Finally, Gina's mother spoke quietly to her, and Gina took Jacob's hand. "Come, you need food, rest. I take care of you now." Back in their lodge, away from the crowd, Gina's composure cracked. She threw her arms around him, holding him so tight he could barely breathe. "I was so afraid. All night, all morning, I prayed to spirits to keep you safe." "They heard you," Jacob said, wrapping his arms around her. "Or maybe your brother's medicine bundle protected me. Either way, I'm here." She pulled back to look at him, her hands framing his face. "You are covered in dust and smell like smoke and horses. Probably. It was a long ride. I heat water, you wash, then sleep. You look exhausted." Jacob didn't argue. He let her tend to him, bringing heated water and helping him wash the grime of travel away. Her hands were gentle, caring, and he felt the last of his tension drain away under her touch. When he was clean and had eaten the food she provided, he collapsed onto their sleeping furs. Gina lay down beside him, and he pulled her close. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "For waiting, for worrying, for caring. I am your wife, is what wives do." But her voice held warmth and something deeper. "I am glad you come home to me." Jacob fell asleep with her in his arms, and for the first time since leaving on the raid, he felt truly at peace. The weeks that followed were different than the ones before. Something had shifted, both in how the village saw Jacob and in how he and Gina related to each other. He was no longer the outsider being tested. He was accepted, one of them, and people treated him accordingly. He continued learning, but now he also began teaching. Several young warriors wanted to learn to shoot his rifle, and he started giving lessons. In exchange, they taught him advanced techniques with bow and knife. Teachers seemed pleased with his language progress, and they began having deeper conversations about tribal history and customs. But most importantly, his relationship with Gina deepened. They spent their evenings talking and laughing, sharing dreams and fears. They made love with increasing passion and tenderness as they learned what pleased each other. They developed small rituals, like how Gina would braid a section of his hair each morning, or how Jacob would massage her feet each evening while she told him stories. One evening, about a month after the raid, Jacob was practicing his language skills with Gina when she suddenly went very still. Her hand moved to her stomach, a wondering expression on her face. "Gina, what is it?" "I think maybe I am pregnant." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "My moon blood late, and I feel different, in my stomach, in my body." Jacob's heart stopped, then started again with a hard thump. "Pregnant. We're going to have a baby, maybe. Is too soon to be certain, but I think yes." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "I think we make new life." Joy and terror washed over Jacob in equal measure. A child. He was going to be a father. The responsibility of it was staggering. But beneath the fear was excitement, a deep happiness that surprised him with its intensity. "That's wonderful," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Scary as hell, but wonderful." She laughed against his chest. Yes, both those things. We tell no one yet. Wait until I am certain. But I want you to know. Over the next weeks, it became clear that Gina's instinct was correct. She began to show the signs of early pregnancy, and her mother confirmed it with knowing looks and herbal teas meant to strengthen the womb. When they finally announced it to the village, there was great celebration. The chief's first grandchild, especially after losing his son, was cause for joy. Winter settled over the mountains in earnest. Snow piled high, and the tribe moved into their winter pattern of life. There was less hunting, more time spent on indoor tasks like making tools and clothing and telling stories. Jacob spent these long winter evenings learning tribal legends from the elders, his language skills finally good enough to understand the nuances. He also spent time preparing for the baby. With help from Swift Fox and other men, he built a cradle board, the traditional carrier mothers used. Gina worked on tiny clothes and blankets, her hands moving constantly. They talked about names, about what they hoped for their child, about what kind of parents they wanted to be. I want our child know both worlds, Gina said one snowy evening as they lay together. Know our tribal ways but also understand white man's world. Is that possible? I think so, Jacob said. We'll teach them everything we know. They'll be strong because they have both. Like us, Gina said softly. We are strong because we have each other. Yeah, like us. As her pregnancy progressed, Jacob found himself falling more deeply in love with his wife. He loved watching her hand rest protectively over her growing belly. He loved the glow that seemed to radiate from her. He loved her strength and her gentleness, and the way she laughed at his still clumsy language mistakes. One night, as spring began to hint at its arrival, Jacob woke to find Gina crying quietly beside him. He immediately pulled her close. What's wrong? Is it the baby? Are you hurt? No, baby is fine. I am fine. She wiped at her tears. I was dreaming about my brother, about how he would have been uncle to our child, how he would have taught our son or daughter to hunt and track, and I am sad he never meet them. Jacob held her tighter. I'm sorry. I wish things had been different. I know. But I also think about how we met because of what happened, how I find you because my brother died saving me. And I wonder if maybe this was meant to be, if maybe something good can come from something terrible. She looked up at him. Is that wrong, to be grateful for something that cost my brother his life? No, Jacob said firmly. Your brother sacrificed himself so you could live, so you could have a future. This is that future. You, me, our baby, that's what he died for. Honoring that, being happy, that's not wrong. That's exactly right. She nodded, fresh tears falling. I love you, Jacob. I not plan to fall in love. I think we would be partners, friends maybe, but I love you. I need you to know. His heart felt like it might burst. I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes. They kissed, deep and slow, and made love with careful tenderness, mindful of the baby between them. And when they fell asleep afterward, it was with the peace of two people who had found exactly where they belonged. Spring came slowly to the Montana mountains. Snow retreated grudgingly, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. Birds returned, filling the air with song. The tribe prepared for the spring hunt, and life began to move at a faster pace again. Gina's belly had swelled significantly, and the village women predicted the baby would come in late spring or early summer. They began teaching her birthing practices, and Gina in turn shared what she learned with Jacob, wanting him to understand the process even though men typically weren't present for births. I want you close, she said. Not in lodge during birth, but close, so I know you are there. I'll be right outside, Jacob promised, and the second they let me in, I'll be by your side. As the time grew closer, Jacob found himself increasingly anxious. Childbirth was dangerous, especially in a world without doctors or hospitals. Women died. Babies died. The thought of losing Gina or their child terrified him more than any raid or battle ever had. Chief Greywing noticed his worry and pulled him aside one day. "You fear for my daughter." "Yes," Jacob admitted. "I've never been this scared in my life." "This is good. Mean you love her, love your child, but you must trust. Women of our tribe birth many healthy babies. My wife will be with her. Other women who know what to do. Your job is to wait and have faith." "I'll try. And if something go wrong, if spirits decide to take her from us, you must be strong. For baby, for our people, you understand." Jacob's throat closed up. "I understand, but I'm praying it doesn't come to that." "As am I, son, as am I." The labor started on a warm June evening. Gina had been restless all day, and when her water broke, the women quickly moved her into a special birthing lodge. Jacob was ushered out firmly but gently, and he found himself pacing outside with Chief Greywing and several other men who had been through this before. "Sit," the chief commanded. "You will wear a path in the earth." "I can't sit. What if something goes wrong? What if she needs me?" "Then women will tell us. Until then, we wait." Hours passed. Jacob heard Gina cry out occasionally, and each sound was like a knife in his heart. He wanted to burst into the lodge, to be with her, to hold her hand. But this was not his world's way, and he had to trust in her traditions. Dawn was breaking when a baby's cry finally split the air. Jacob's head jerked up, and he stared at the lodge entrance. The sound came again, strong and lusty. A living child. Thank God, an older woman emerged, smiling. She spoke to Chief Greywing in their language, and the chief's stern face broke into a wide grin. He turned to Jacob. "You have son, strong, healthy boy, and my daughter is well, tired but well." Jacob's knees went weak with relief. "Can I see them?" "Soon. Let women finish their work. Then you go to your wife and son." It felt like forever, but finally Gina's mother appeared in the doorway and gestured for Jacob to enter. He practically ran inside. Gina lay on furs, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. And in her arms, wrapped in soft deerskin, was a tiny baby with a shock of dark hair and wrinkled red skin. The baby was perfect. "Jacob," Gina said softly, "come meet your son." He knelt beside them, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. Miniature fingers wrapped around his finger with surprising strength. Jacob felt tears streaming down his face and didn't care. "He's perfect. You're perfect. You're both perfect." "You want to hold him?" Gina asked. Jacob had never held a baby before, but he let Gina show him how to support the head, how to cradle the small body against his chest. His son. His son. The reality of it overwhelmed him. "Have you thought about a name?" he asked, unable to look away from the baby's face. "In our tradition, we wait to name baby. Watch them for a few days, see what their spirit shows us. But I think about it. I want name him after my brother. His tribal name was Soaring Eagle. Maybe we call son something that honors that." "What about Jonah's?" Jacob suggested. "Jonah's Eagle Preston. That way he has both worlds in his name. A white first name and a tribal middle name." Gina smiled. "Jonah's, I like this, is good name, strong name." She looked down at their son. "Hello, Jonah's, welcome to world." They stayed like that for a long time, just the three of them, a new family. Eventually, Jacob returned the baby to Gina so she could nurse him, and he watched in amazement as his son latched on and fed. The women came back in to check on mother and baby, and Chief Greywing was allowed to meet his grandson. The old chief's eyes were suspiciously wet as he held the baby. "He looks like my son. Same shape of eyes, same strong spirit. This is good. My son lives on through this child." Over the next days and weeks, Jacob fell completely in love with fatherhood. Every sound Jonah's made fascinated him. Every expression, every movement. He helped Gina care for the baby, learning to change the soft moss they used as diapers, learning to recognize different types of cries. Sleep became a distant memory, but Jacob didn't care. He had never been happier in his life. He had a wife he loved, a son who was healthy and strong, a community that had accepted him as one of their own. All the loneliness and drifting of his years before meeting Gina seemed like a different lifetime. One evening, when Jonas was about a month old, Jacob sat outside their lodge with his son sleeping against his chest. Gina emerged and sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You are good, father," she said. "Better than I hoped for. I'm trying. He's pretty amazing." "He is. And he is lucky. He has father who chose to stay, who chose us even when it was hard and strange and scary." She lifted her head to look at him. "You know, when my people first find you with me in that cave, I was so afraid. Afraid you would run away, afraid you would refuse marriage, afraid you would accept but then regret it and grow to resent me. I could never resent you. I know that now. But then I not know you, not know your heart." She touched his face gently. "Now I know. Now I see who you are inside. You are best thing that ever happened to me, Jacob Preston." "You're the best thing that happened to me," he said. "You and Jonas both. You gave me a reason to stop drifting. You gave me a home." They kissed softly, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the village, someone was singing, and the smell of cooking fires drifted on the evening breeze. Summer passed into fall, and Jonas grew steadily. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and rarely fussing unless hungry or tired. The village doted on him, especially his grandfather. Chief Greywing was frequently seen carrying his grandson around, pointing out birds and animals, speaking to him in their language. Jacob didn't mind. He wanted his son to be deeply rooted in both his heritages. As fall progressed, Jacob began to think about the future. He and Gina had been married over a year now. The required year of living with the tribe was technically complete. He could leave if he wanted, take his family back to white man's world. But the more he thought about it, the less appealing that option seemed. What did he have in white man's world? No family, no real home. He could go back to bounty hunting, but that was no life for a family. He could try to start a ranch or farm, but he had little money and less experience. Here, with the tribe, he had purpose and belonging. He had skills that were valued and a place that felt like home. He discussed it with Gina one evening after putting Jonas to bed in his cradle board. "I've been thinking about our future." "Yes." She looked up from the shirt she was sewing. "When we married, your father said we would stay with the tribe for a year, and then I could decide if I wanted to take you to white man's world." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I don't want to leave. I want to stay here, raise Jonas here, be part of this community. Is that all right with you?" Gina's face lit up with joy and relief. "Yes. Yes is very all right. I not want to leave my people, my family, but I would have gone with you if you wanted, because I am your wife. And I'm your husband, which means we make decisions together." He took her hand. "This is home now, not just for a year but for always if you'll have me. Of course I have you. You are mine, I am yours. This is our home." She paused, then added shyly, "Maybe someday we build our own lodge, bigger, more space. Maybe fill it with more children." "More children," Jacob laughed. "One baby is exhausting. You want more, not right now. But someday, yes. I want Jonas to have brothers and sisters, want big family." She looked at him hopefully. "You want that too?" "Yeah," Jacob said, realizing he meant it. "I do. A big, loud, happy family. That sounds perfect." They sealed the decision with a kiss, and when they made love that night, it was with the knowledge that they were choosing this life together, not out of obligation or tradition, but out of love. The year turned. bringing snow and cold. Jonas's first winter was busy with caring for a baby who was increasingly mobile and curious. He learned to roll over, then to sit up, then to crawl. Jacob and Gina watched his development with proud eyes, documenting every milestone. Chief Greywing's health began to decline that winter. He caught a cold that settled in his chest and never quite left. By spring, he was weak and thin, though he tried to hide it. Jacob spent time with him when he could, learning more stories and history, sensing that the old chief was trying to pass on as much knowledge as possible. "You will look after my daughter and grandson when I am gone," the chief said one day. "It wasn't a question, of course, but you're not going anywhere yet. You'll get better when the weather warms." The chief smiled sadly. "I am old man, Jacob. I fight many battles, survive many winters. But I am tired now. My son waits for me in spirit world, and soon I will join him." He gripped Jacob's hand with surprising strength. "You came to us as stranger. I give you my daughter because of tradition, because of debt, but you became more than I hope. You became good husband, good father, good man of our people. I am proud to call you son." Jacob's throat tightened. "I'm proud to call you father. Thank you for giving me a chance when you could have killed me. You earn chance with your actions. This is all any man can do." The chief leaned back, exhausted from the conversation. "Take care of them. Take care of my people. I will. I promise." Chief Geronimo Greywing passed away in his sleep 3 days later. The village mourned deeply, losing both the chief and a son in the span of less than 2 years. Jacob stood beside Gina at the funeral ceremony, holding Jonas, who was now almost a year old. Gina cried quietly, and Jacob held her afterward as she grieved. "He was ready," she said through her tears. "He tell me so week ago. Said he was ready to be with brother again, with other family who passed before. Said I should not be sad, should celebrate he lived good long life. He was a great man, a great chief. Jonas will grow up hearing stories about his grandfather. Yes, we make sure he know. Make sure he understand what great man his grandfather was." A new chief was chosen, a cousin of Chief Greywing named Running Bear. He was a good man, strong and fair, and he assured Jacob that his place in the tribe remained secure. Life gradually returned to its normal rhythms after the mourning period ended. Jonas took his first steps that summer, much to everyone's delight. Jacob found himself chasing after an increasingly mobile toddler, and Gina laughed at his exhaustion. "Now you know why mothers are strong," she said with amusement. "Chasing children is better exercise than any hunting trip." They had settled into a comfortable family life. Jacob had become skilled at hunting and tracking in the tribal way, and he often went on hunting parties. Gina had her women's work, caring for Jonas and their lodge, making clothing and preparing food. In the evenings, they came together as a family, playing with Jonas, telling stories, making love after their son was asleep. When Jonas was about 18 months old, Gina told Jacob she was pregnant again. This time there was no hesitation or fear, just joy. They knew what to expect now, and they looked forward to expanding their family. The pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Gina knew what was coming. She carried the baby well, and Jonas was fascinated by his mother's growing belly, patting it and babbling at it in his mixture of English and tribal language. Their daughter was born in late winter, during a snowstorm that reminded Gina of the night her mother had birthed her. They named her Sarah Windchaser Preston, honoring both worlds again with a name that reflected her heritage. Sarah was quieter than Jonas had been, a contemplative baby with wide, dark eyes that seemed to take in everything. Jonas was immediately protective of his little sister, and Jacob's heart melted watching his son gently touch Sarah's tiny hands and croon to her in baby talk. "Our family is growing," Gina said contentedly one evening, nursing Sarah while Jonas played at their feet with carved wooden animals Jacob had made. "We are blessed." "We are," Jacob agreed. "More than I ever thought possible." The years flowed by like water over stones. Jonas grew strong and clever, learning to hunt with his father and uncles, learning the tribal ways from his grandmother and the elders. Sarah grew into a bright, curious child who asked endless questions and had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Jacob aged well into his 30s, his hair showing its first threads of gray, his face weathered but happy. Gina remained as beautiful as ever in his eyes, and he told her so often, making her blush and smile. They added 2 more children to their family over the years. Another boy they named Matthew Wolf Spirit Preston, and finally a second daughter named Rebecca Dawnstar Preston. Their lodge, which they had indeed expanded, was always full of noise and laughter and life. Jacob became one of the tribal elders himself, teaching younger men to hunt and track, sharing his knowledge freely. He never forgot that he had come to this tribe as an outsider, and he worked to bridge the 2 worlds, believing that understanding between white men and tribal peoples was possible if both sides tried. Some white traders and settlers learned of the white man living with the tribe and came seeking him out, curious. Jacob dealt with them carefully, negotiating trades that benefited his people while maintaining cautious relationships with the white world. It was a delicate balance, but one he had learned to walk. On a warm summer evening when Jacob was 40 years old, he sat outside his lodge watching his children play. Jonas was 18 now, a young warrior who had distinguished himself on his first hunt. Sarah was 16, beautiful and bright, already attracting the attention of young men. Matthew was 12, all energy and enthusiasm, wrestling with another boy his age. And Rebecca, just 8 years old, sat beside her father braiding grass stems into patterns. Gina emerged from the lodge and settled beside him, taking his hand. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children, listening to the sounds of the village around them. "You ever wonder," Gina asked quietly, "wonder what your life would have been if you had not heard me call that night in the storm? If you had ridden past, continued to Challies, collected your bounty money?" Jacob thought about it, truly thought about it for the first time in years. Sometimes. I wonder what happened to that other Jacob, the one who would have kept drifting from town to town. I think he probably would have died in some dusty street somewhere, shot by an outlaw or killed in a bar fight. That life was lonely and empty, even if I didn't realize it then. "And you not regret choosing this life, choosing me?" He turned to look at her, this woman who had transformed his entire existence. "Not for one second. Every single day since I met you has been better than anything that came before. You gave me love, family, purpose, home." "How could I possibly regret that?" She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Jacob Preston, then, now, always. I love you too, gentle wind Greywing Preston." He used both her names, the one the tribe knew and the one that appeared on the marriage certificate they had gotten from a traveling minister years ago, making their union legal in both worlds. Rebecca looked up from her grass braiding. "Papa, tell a story. Tell about how you and Mama met." Their other children heard and came running. Even Jonas, who considered himself too old for stories, settled near his parents to listen. Jacob and Gina exchanged amused glances. They had told this story countless times, but their children never tired of hearing it. "Well," Jacob began, "it was a cold November night in 1876, and I was riding toward Challies when I heard a scream in the wind." As he told the familiar story, embellishing certain parts and letting Gina fill in details from her perspective, Jacob felt overwhelming gratitude for the path his life had taken. That freezing night when he had heard Gina's cry for help had seemed like a simple choice at the time. Help someone in need or ride on. He had chosen to help, and that single decision had given him everything that mattered. He looked around at his family, his children listening with rapt attention, his wife warm and solid beside him, and he knew with absolute certainty that he would make the same choice again. Every time, without hesitation. The sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Smoke from cooking fires rose toward the stars beginning to appear overhead. In the distance, someone was singing, and the drums that accompanied tribal ceremonies beat a steady rhythm. Jacob Preston, former bounty hunter and drifter, current husband and father and member of a tribe that had taken him in as one of their own, smiled and pulled his wife closer. He was home. He had found his place in the world. And he lived the rest of his days surrounded by love, raising his children to be bridges between two worlds, growing old with the woman who had changed his life with a single scream in the darkness. They faced challenges together, celebrated triumphs together, and never once forgot the miracle of that storm-swept night when two lost souls had found each other and chosen to build something beautiful from that impossible meeting. Their love story became legend in the tribe, told and retold by the fires on long winter nights. The white man who heard a cry in the darkness and chose compassion over convenience. The tribal woman who survived tragedy and chose hope over despair. And the impossible request made at dawn that became the foundation of a family, a legacy, and a love that transcended cultures and lasted a lifetime. Years later, when Jacob was gray and weathered and his children had children of their own, he would hold Gina's hand and remember that first night. The fear in her eyes that had slowly transformed into trust, the warmth of the fire in the cave, the moment he had decided to say yes to an impossible request, and how that yes had given him everything he had never known he needed. No regrets, Gina would ask him sometimes, an old joke between them. Not a single one, he would answer, and he would mean it with every fiber of his being. They lived long lives, surrounded by family and love, and when they finally passed, within months of each other in the way of couples who had been together so long they couldn't imagine existing apart, they left behind a legacy of children and grandchildren who carried both their heritages proudly. The tribe remembered them as examples of how love could bridge any divide, how compassion in a moment of crisis could change the course of many lives. And sometimes, on cold November nights when the wind howled through the Montana mountains, people would tell the story of the cowboy who shared his shelter with a lost tribal woman, and how at dawn, her people came with an impossible request that became the beginning of one of the greatest love stories their tribe had ever known.